This is Sherry Grunska, and welcome to the. I'm blank. We were laughing about what is this show called? The Horse Barn Management Show. Don't forget it, the Horse Barn Management Show. And we're live tonight. We're a little silly. Anyways, welcome. And we have a whole hour of real talk about your horse business and running any kind of horse business. A lot of it's geared towards boarding horses because it's really, I feel, super important. Boarding horses is probably, I feel it's undervalued, underrated, and it is the core of the horse industry in so many factors because whether you're a horse trainer, whether you're racing horses, whether you're showing them, you have to have a place to keep the horse for leisure, for breeding, and not everyone has a place of their own. So I am a real advocate for all the people out there, all the awesome people out there who want to open up their homes, their properties, build stables, whether it's 2 horses or 40, and start horse businesses. It's a great big risk, and we're here to take some of the risk out of it, and I want you to be successful in all of it. And so we talk about a lot of good stuff, and you check out probarnmanagement.com after this if you want to see any of the previous live shows. They're all there, or my podcast, blogs, books, and also you can go on YouTube. And if you have any questions, just ask us live. Let me know where you're from. We have a lot of people that are from all over, and it's so cool when I see people from different parts of the country and other areas, Ontario and different other places in the world. Very cool. So thanks for joining us. Today we have a lot to talk about, but right now, hot off the press, I'm super excited. I want to tell you guys I'm only doing one this year, and it's June 12th and 13th. Of this year. I'm doing a 2-day workshop here at our barn, and I have the flyer on Facebook and on my website. 2 full days here. The first day will be at our stable with my husband and me, and we're gonna just open up everything and let you know how we run it all, give you ideas on what you can do for your place, cost versus revenue, and it's a great 2 days. And there's a lot of barn owners and barn managers that come to it, horse trainers. You'll get to meet other people and talk about your stable and problem shoot, or even if you're building, we'll tell you all the things we did wrong and the things we like, where we lost money, where we make money in different areas, and be as honest with you as we can. And so check it out. It's June 12th and 13th. The cost is $350. You'll get my book. We'll feed you really well, and I'll give you so many learning materials when you go home. You're going to go home with just a stack of papers of everything, from even how to ask someone if you're going to give a 30-day notice. We are going to set you up for success. Limited seats are available for that, so check into it because it's going to fill up fast. So I want to, hopefully I get to meet you and talk about your horse business. Okay, so anyways, we had all kinds of questions roll in this week, and we're going to dig right into them. If you have a question, go ahead and let Trish know. Type it out. She'll read it. She'll let me know she has a question, especially if it's something we're talking about at the time, because I can only see the camera. I don't get to see the computer, so I have no idea what you're saying at the time. And so if you have a question, just write it down, send it to us live, and we'll answer it for you. Okay. So the first person who sent me a question, and I thought this was a really good question because I've seen barns do this all over, and I love this question because I actually wondered this too when we first started boarding. And the question was, if someone wants to board at your barn, or let's say they're boarding at your stable, and they have a horse, but then they decide to buy, let's say they decide to buy a pony. Should you discount the stall for the pony? And if the boarder feels that they should be discounted because their horse is smaller, doesn't need as much hay or grain, do you do that as a barn owner? And you know, I kind of wondered that too when we first opened 15 years ago. And I've seen lots of barns do it different ways, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on it right now and tell you some of the residual effects of that. So first of all, we have 2 ponies at our barn, and they have stalls, 12 by 12 stalls, and they pay the full rate, same rate as a full-size horse. And for a horse owner, it would be easy to ask, well, why do I have to pay the same rate? Because my pony eats a lot less than a horse. But the matter of fact is, the pony may eat less, but you still have to clean the stall, you still have to do all the physical part of it, walk the horse outside, bring the horse in if you have turnout, fill the water bucket, all these other things that you do. And when you start doing that and you start saying, well, my pony eats less, so I should be discounted on the board, what about the draft horse that has, you know, that is very big and eats more than the average horse? Or what about the yearling who might be eating less at the time, but then goes through a growth spurt and you have to feed them more to keep their weight up? What about the horse that is really athletic, is being worked 5 or 6 days a week in competition, and you are just giving them extra hay? Do they get fed extra hay? Do you charge them for that? And what about the senior horse who is lost some of his teeth and he's getting less hay, and do you give him a reduced rate? So all your horses are going to eat different. If you're going to give special feedings to each horse, they're all going to eat a little bit different. Some you're going to feed a little bit more, and some you're going to feed a little less. We have smaller horses that don't get as much as the big thoroughbreds or warm bloods at our barn, and it all averages out. I don't give a discount because the people are renting a stall, and if they're renting a stall, then it's kind of like an apartment. No matter how long you're using that apartment, even if you go on vacation for 6 months and the apartment is empty, you still have to pay rent on that apartment. And that's how I look at it, and that's how I treat it. So I don't give any discounts at all. Now, some may argue with that. I have talked to barn owners. I knew of one barn owner in particular that she was driving herself nuts because she was charging according to how much the horse ate. So what they did is they did 2 flakes, and I'm talking about a regular small bell, 2 flakes per feeding. If the horse wanted 3 flakes, they would charge. If they wanted 5 flakes, they would charge. I don't have all that time in the world to do all that, and I don't want to do all that. When I talk to people, I'm telling you to simplify your life. So I really am a believer, if you have a multidiscipline barn and you have lots of horses, it's going to even out. You're going to have big horses that are 16, 17 hands. You're going to have small little horses. And yes, the big horses are going to eat more. The ponies are going to eat less. It evens out all the way across the board. I've never had a problem with it, and we feed each horse accordingly, and we don't charge any extra for the hay. We also don't reduce any fees, you know, any board rates because of horses that are small. So I hope that answers your question. It's a really good question. It's really important for setting up your business, because if you start charging depending on how much the horse eats, you could be giving yourself a big headache. And the other part of that I want you to think about is your turnout, because if the horse is living in a stall or by themselves, it's a little easier to control how much they eat. But if you're giving a reduced rate to a pony and they go out in a herd and all the horses are eating, you know, that pony might be eating as much as a horse. I mean, you really don't have control once they're out in the field and they're eating whatever they want. You know, there's a time when you could be micromanaging everything as a barn owner, and it just gets nuts. And so I'm really a huge advocate on just simplifying and keeping it straight. If you got someone using your stall, I don't care if it's a pony or a 17-hand thoroughbred. They all pay the same price. So I hope that answers. It's a great question, and it's really an important one to think about when you're setting up your boarding rates. Any questions on that, just let us know, and we'll go. Okay, so this was a really good question, and I love talking about this kind of stuff only because when we first built our barn, and for some of you that maybe are new and joining us, we built our barn. We've been in business since 2005, and before that it took like 2 years to get the business up and going, and it was a lot of learning on my part because I didn't know what I was doing going into actually starting a business and taking such a huge financial risk. So someone asked me, they're getting ready, they have this land that's raw, so nothing on it, and that's what we did, and they want to build a barn, and they want to know what are some of the things you need in place before you can build. And I'll tell you right now, it's going to be different depending on where you live. I'm in Wisconsin, and our township of Vinland was the one that had to approve some of the things, the permits that we needed. But most of them are going to have some of the similar stuff. So I thought we would talk about some of that on what you need if you're going to build a stable and have a horse boarding business. And I want to make this really clear. I want to encourage you to do this part right, because I've talked to 2 different people over the last like 5 years, 2 different barn owners from other states who opened a boarding stable and never got the permits. And I know it's hard to believe, but there are people out there that aren't crazy about horses. And the neighbors called in on them and reported them, and it turned out they didn't have the right permits, and they had to close down for a while. And I know, I can't even believe someone called in on them. I thought that part was really lousy, but they didn't like the smell, the horses, the manure, whatever, and those people are, something's wrong with them. How could you not like it? Like, how could you not like it? But anyway, she didn't have her permits in order, and she had to shut down for a while and get all that. And because the county where she was at, and this was in Arizona, was very upset at this, she had to go through hoops to get it going and up and going. So do it right the first time, get everything in order. But I'll talk about some of the stuff that I want you to think about when you are going to build a barn and open a horse boarding business. The first thing you're going to want to do is you need to get approval, probably from your township or your county. So we are, our address is Neenah, the city of Neenah, but we're actually the town of Vinland, and it's smaller. So we had to go before the board, and we had to have a plan. They wanted to see what our barn would look like, how many horses we would board, and then they send out letters. This is done ahead of time. They send out letters to all the neighboring properties and let them know that we are considering building a boarding stable and starting a business. And that way, if these people want to come and talk about it and share their concerns, they can. And then they vote to see whether you can have the business or not. So we had to do that, and we did get approved, but it was a conditional use permit. So a conditional use permit, they tell you how many horses you can have on your property for the amount of acres you have, and also what you can use the barn for. So right now our business is horse boarding. We can't turn it into a I can't even think of what I would turn it into. We can't turn it into maybe something that would be like a concert hall where people are going to have live concerts here all the time. It's a completely different type of business with people. We would have to get approval for that. So that's, I guess, what I'm saying is you have to, there's guidelines on what you can do. You can't just all of a sudden decide, you know, in this huge building that you're going to have concerts every Saturday night. You'll probably get calls and complaints. So you want to make sure the conditional use permit is in place if your township requires one. And then they are going to let you know what permits and what kind of zoning you need. So we're out in the country. We also have farmland and crops are raised on it. So we are completely 100% agricultural. That might be different for you if your stable is more in the city. And so you need to find out how you're going to be zoned. Some of that will make a difference on your taxes too. Unfortunately, it's just kind of the way it is. So you want to find out what your zoning is going to be and what your permits are going to be. And I got to tell you, when we first were going to build, and I had to get the permits. I was shocked at how much money I had to spend on permits to get our business built, and it was a lot of money. So be prepared for that, because that's those are some of your initial startup cost. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need a business license. Depending on where you live, a seller's permit. You're going to want to have that and be set up. We went to our attorney to have all this stuff processed through, and we set ours up as Vinland Stables LLC, where I think there are some stables out there that are corporations. I just don't know of any here in this area, but I've heard of them. But we are we're an LLC, and that works out good. The other thing, which is really important now, probably one of the biggest things you're going to have to make sure you do right, is your manure disposal. The DNR is going to ask. They're going to want to check. They want to know where you're going to be putting your manure. Is it close to any waterways? How often are you going to be able to get rid of it? How are you getting rid of it? So that was something that they wanted to know exactly. They wanted us to have a slab where the manure was going to go. It had to be far enough away. We have a back part of our property where we have a stream that goes through, and it could not be anywhere near there. It had to be so many, I think it had to be 150 feet away from there. And that was really important. So you need to find out some of that stuff, because the thing is, if you don't get that stuff right ahead of time and then you have someone complain, then you've opened a can of worms and it could make things worse. You have a question?
We have a question, I believe, about the permits.
Okay.
Would this apply for, would this apply if you are starting a training business rather than a boarding business?
If you are going to train horses and you're still the same thing, you have horses coming into your property, anytime you have a business, it doesn't matter what type of business it is, you have to have the right permits for it, everything has to be right. So if you're training horses at your place, you're going to have horses coming onto your property, and I'm assuming they're going to be coming for 30, 60, 90 days or whatever. Those horses are boarded and they're being trained. So you're boarding them and you're training them. I would check with your township or your county and find out what you need. So I had to go through the city of Oshkosh, Winnebago County, and then through our township. There was a lot of permits. I can't tell you how much. I'm going to stress this. Check and find out what you need first, because so many times people jump into stuff and then they're trying to backtrack to get things. I've known of, like I said, 2 people who had issues, and they both worked out okay, but it was because, unfortunately, it was because someone complained and they didn't have the proper permits in place. So I guess to cover yourself, I would find out what you need. You might not need a big deal. You might not need as much as we had to. We were actually building a barn. Our barn is 26,000 square feet, has a huge indoor, has a bathroom. The bathroom alone, the mound system, that was a huge thing. You have to get that all approved because we have a mound system. And that had to have a permit. I mean, there was stuff that had to be done in order to have all this in line. You know, the electricians, all these people that come, all this has to be all cleared and checked out, and then it has to be checked by, you know, it could be checked by your city, county fire marshal. For instance, we have the Winnebago County, the fire marshal comes twice a year, and they check on all our fire extinguishers. They want to make sure they're all current. I have to have them checked, paid to have a certain company come and check them, make sure they're up to code, exit signs, all that stuff. So you really want to make sure all that's in order. It can seem overwhelming at first, but you got to remember that's with any business. Any business you do, you're going to have all this startup stuff, and it's like, you're kind of pulling your hair out because it's so much stuff. But once you get it in order and you get everything in order, it'll start to flow. So what I'm going to say, I do this every week. I hope you guys don't mind. If you get a chance, I'm going to plug my book because all this stuff is in there. I talk about all this stuff. It's so important, and to set up your barn right. A step-by-step guide to starting and running a successful horse boarding business. It's a big book, and I talk about a lot of this stuff. It's really important because I want you to set it up right so you don't have someone show up at your door, and because usually what happens, and I don't want to sound like a downer, but it's because someone has complained, and usually it's when someone complains that they realize, oh, they didn't have that. You know what I mean? They don't have the permit. Oh, they have too many horses on the property for the size of their place. So it's really important to get all that lined up. You can find the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, along with my other books, and on probarnmanagement.com. So check it out. You won't regret it. If you have any more questions on that, just dive on in. That is a really good, those are really good things to think about, because you're laying the foundation for your business, so you want to get it right off the bat. Okay. Now, I'm going to, okay, I'm looking to build a barn, but now I'm concerned about building it wrong after listening to some of your shows. Not sure how to design it for efficiency when it comes to chores. What are some of your top suggestions when building a boarding stable to make it efficient for daily chores? That is a great question, because you know, I can't tell you how many barns I've been to, and they are beautiful stables, but in almost every single situation, they built the stable, they built the building for the comfort of the clients, and the horses were kind of put second sometimes. The care was good, but definitely the employees and the barn manager were thought about last. And I'm the first one, I'm going to tell you, when you're building a barn, or you're changing things, or you're setting up anything, maybe you're buying a place, the first thing is the care of the horses. Right next to that is ease and efficiency of the chores, and they work together. So if you're going to build a stable or buy a place, if you're a horse owner and you're listening to this, I know you're not going to like when I say this, but really the client comes last. The horse comes first, along with the chores, the employees. The client comes last. It's not about their comfort. It's about the horses thriving, feeling comfortable, doing well in their environment, and about the ease of chores. Those are the most important things. And usually it's the other way around. People will go into a barn, a stable, and they'll love it because they have all these cool things. They have a really awesome lounge. They might have a cappuccino machine. You know, they could have all this really cool stuff, but the employees are burnt out because the chores are set up, because the hay is in another building, or the grain's in another building, and the weather's bad and they got to go out in the weather all the time. Or the horses, you have to walk way too far to get them out, and it's exhausting. Same with bringing them back in. The manure, seems like the manure is a half a mile down the road. I'm exaggerating, but so far you have to wheel it there. It's backbreaking. So for me, I'm really, if you are living in a state where you have 4 seasons like we do in Wisconsin, I think it's really smart to build a stable where it's all inclusive. It's completely, in the winter you have everything self-sufficient. So our hay, our grain, our bedding, everything is in the same building. If you look at our barn and you go in, it's divided into separate areas. You have your stable area, and you have the arena, and then you have a back area where all the hay is, and then another back area where the shavings are. But the cool thing about our barn is We did some things wrong in our barn, but this part I think we did right, is that if the weather's bad and we have a blizzard or it's pouring down rain or it's 60-mile-an-hour winds and the horses are all in, we never have to go outside. It's all inside. We take care of all those horses inside a building, and we never have to go outside except to dump the manure, and our manure is very close to the building, so it's super easy. So if I was going to tell you some things, the top suggestions would be make sure your hay is close for bad weather so that you can get to it and you're not having to go out in the weather. You're going to want to make sure that you have enough storage to get you through quite a few months of hay without having to have more hay delivered. So one of the biggest problems I see at boarding stables, and it's just because people haven't thought it through, is they have their stalls. They've thought out all the fun stuff like the stalls and the tack rooms and the arena and the lounge. All that stuff is really fun, but they forget about the hay, and they have hardly any storage for hay, or they're only allowed to bring like 5 bales in because they have no room for it in the back. We can hold 100 900-pound bales in our back area of our barn, 100 of them at a time, to feed 27 horses, and we never have to go outside to get that hay. So if you're going to feed, whether small bales, round bales, or large bales, you want to make sure that on a sunny day when it's easy and the life is good, great. But on the days that the weather is really lousy, you can be in the barn with the horses and you never have to deal with it. And so think about that. Same with bedding. I see lots of barns where the bedding is in a separate like shelter or shed that's not even connected to the stable. And it sucks to have to go out there, get the bedding, especially if it's bulk, and then it's blowing all over the place, or you're trying to get through the snow to get it into the barn. And so if you have the option, get the shavings in the barn. So our shavings is in the barn, and the same thing, we don't have to go outside for that. It works out really nice. They just come deliver it. It's inside, and if the weather's bad, we don't have to worry about it. So those are huge. When you have employees and they have to go outside and do all that stuff, they're going to get burnt out, and I sure wouldn't want to do it, and I do it every day. So I'm just telling you, think about those things. Think about your grain and supplements. That's another huge one. People forget about how much room grain and supplements are, and we have 27 horses in our big barn, and you could have a lot of grain and a lot of supplements and a lot of bags and everything. So you really want to have an area that's inside, that's easy to get to, that you can make up your grain, make up whatever you need if you have to give meds, and again, it's all inside. You don't ever have to go outside again. Super important. I would rather see you spend more money on that part of your business than a fancy lounge or other stuff that costs a lot of money, because you're in it for the long haul. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You're in it for years down the road. I mean, we've been doing this 16 years now. You don't want to burn yourself out to the point where after 3 years you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. Because it's not going to matter how nice your lounge is, or if you have a cappuccino machine or leather seats, if you can't keep employees and you're tired and you're burnt out because you're set up poorly. So if you're going to build, think about that part first. And all the other stuff can come later. You can always add on to the lounge, and you can always buy that cappuccino machine later on. So those 3 things are super important. Top of the list: hay, bedding, and grain and supplements. Some of the other things that I think are really important that are overlooked are blankets. If you're going to have horses and you're going to have maybe a barn that has show horses, even if you have a heated barn and you're going to have horses that have like thoroughbreds that don't get much of a coat, or you're going to have horses that are trace clipped or full body clipped, you're going to have a lot of blanketing. And if you have a heated barn, you're going to really be doing a lot of blanketing. So where are you going to put all those blankets? And people tend to forget that. We don't let any blankets, once the blanket's been on the horse's back, it's not allowed in our tack rooms, and we have 2 tack rooms in our barn. So they can either hang it on a blanket bar by their stall, or we have blanket bars that are in the back of our barn by the hay and grain. It's separate, but it's back there. And they can hang all their dirty blankets back there until they have to go home in May. And it works out great. So I think that's another thing, especially if you're blanketing horses. It's really a pain if you have no place to put the blankets. And that's something that people kind of forget about. Do you have a question?
I have 2.
Okay.
First one's back to permits.
Uh-huh.
Are any specific permits needed for a rescue or sanctuary, aside from applying for the 501c3 status?
I don't know. You would have to check on that. I'm kind of unfamiliar with the rescues and what you need to have that established. So you'll have to check. But I'm sure there are people you can check and find out who are much more knowledgeable than me, and I would probably ask other people that are already doing it. So sorry, I don't have an answer for you on that one.
And this one
Mm-hmm.
can go? Okay. What machinery do you recommend are a must for 20 horses on 35 acres?
I was just going to talk about that. Good timing. I love it. It was right here. Okay. So this is the thing, and I'm going to try to give you a visual without being able to give you a visual. That's why we do our barn management thing at our stable, because then we talk about the equipment, we show you how we feed, we explain why we do things the way we do it to make it really efficient. So equipment, we feed with the 900-pound bales, the square bales. They're big. We love them. It's actually easier to feed, and we're able to load them, peel them like a big flake onto a wagon with our 4-wheeler to feed out in the paddocks, and it works great. I just love those. We also feed those same bales in our barn with a wheelbarrow. So, but because they're 900 pounds, you can't move them. So I would say, I think piece of equipment that my husband uses the most besides the 4-wheeler and the wagon is a skid loader. What's another name? A cat?
A bobcat.
A bobcat, yeah. So we have a skid loader. It has a bucket, and it has also an attachment with these 3 huge what are those called? Forks. Ooh, yeah. And because in our back of our barn, these 900-pound bales are stacked 4 high. And so what he does is as we get to the next group of 4, he lowers down 2, and he'll lower down a few so that they're stacked 2, and then we can start peeling them off. You have to have machinery to do that. So we have a skid loader. We bought it years ago. It's very old. He takes really good care of it, and that is like a workhorse. It's the best piece of equipment. It's great. It's great for cleaning paddocks because it turns really fast. I personally like it better than a tractor, but if I was going to say for doing chores, that's probably what he uses the most. To feed the horses, though, we use a 4-wheeler every day with a trailer that's behind it, because we feed individual piles. We don't feed round bales, and we don't put like one big bale out there. We feed, like if we have 3 horses in a paddock, then we put 3 piles, sometimes 4 piles, and then they just kind of rotate. That's what we use every morning when we put the horses out. We use that, and then when they come in, the hay is already in their stall. So I guess for us, those would be your mainstays, your skid loader, and we use a 4-wheeler with a trailer. It works great. And our 4-wheeler now is, 16 years old. And I mean, it's hard to believe it's that long, but my husband's really, he's very meticulous, and he takes really good care of stuff, which is good because we can't afford to buy a new one. They're really expensive now. So if you could find a good used one, everything we've purchased used. We have a big farm tractor that he bought, and he bought it used and then refixed it up and everything. And we use that to, it's a large size farm tractor. It's a Farmall. And we use that to drag our paddocks sometimes, and also a manure spreader, because we have 46 acres, so we're able to spread our manure on our fields. And so we have quite a bit of equipment that we have bought over the years, and we just look for the used stuff because the new stuff we couldn't afford, and it works out great. He takes good care of them. And if you were limited to what you're gonna do with 20 horses, for us, I would say the four-wheeler and the wagon works great. You know, to get everybody fed, that's what we use every single morning. But the skid loader is really the workhorse, especially if you're going to go with the large bales. It just does everything, and it turns on a dime. We can clean our paddocks out with it, and it works really good.
Got another question for you. Is there a place where we can find videos of you feeding and using machinery?
You know, it's kind of funny. I thought about doing that. I just haven't gotten that far yet, where I would videotape showing you, like, us how we do stuff. That's why I do these barn management workshops too, is because people can come here and they can see exactly how we do everything. Because it's kind of crazy, but if you're not used to using a 900-pound bale of hay, when you explain to someone how to peel it off and how much a horse gets, you know, how much do they, you know, it's not the same as your regular bales. A lot of people don't know how much to feed a horse, you know, when you're peeling off that big square, because it's like a huge big bale of hay. So I don't have anything right now, but it is something down the road. But if you came here, like for one of our workshops, we would show you everything and go through it all, and we would talk about the cost of it and why we do things the way we do, to make it fast and efficient. And all the equipment we use is all super easy. I mean, I can use it. I mean, it's easy enough for me to use. So, yeah, that's a good suggestion. I'll work on that in the future too, because I don't have anything right now. I just, I wasn't sure how to do all that, and I'm kind of like learning all this as I go on, videotaping and all that. But it's good. It's a good suggestion. So thank you. Do you have another question? Okay.
Do you dedicate certain acreage for manure spreading?
So we have some of our farmland is, when we first built, it had hay on it. But after so many years, the nutrients, it gets depleted and gets kind of gross. So what we do is we do actually a trade with the farmer who we buy hay from, and he uses some of our land now, and it has, he's rotating it. And so I think one year it had soybeans and one year it had corn. It's had all kinds of different stuff on it. So after, usually in the spring, once everything gets dry enough before they are ready to start planting again, David can take our tractor and our manure spreader and put it out there. And also in the fall, he'll take that and get rid of all of it. And he'll, you know, because we're in a real rural area, and the farmer uses a lot of the land around us, we can call him up and say, hey, where can we put some of our manure? So we're really fortunate that way. We're able to get rid of it. We don't put it on our pastures that we're using for our horses to graze in the summer. We don't put it out there. But we do put it out in the fields that are used for other crops. We did for years, we composted our manure, and it really is great to do. It's just that we have been so busy. It's very time consuming, as far as, I shouldn't say it's time consuming for me. It was really time consuming for David, because you have to churn it. It has to get a certain, it has to get hot enough to where it breaks it all down, and we would compost it for like a year. And we did it for quite a few years and sold a lot of it, and it was really nice stuff. But it was just more work, and we just decided not to do it anymore. But if you can compost your manure and sell it, it's like black gold. I would do that. You know, definitely if you have a place to do that, I would do that. We used to take take our grain bags, and I would pay high school kids to come fill up the grain bags with the manure, and then I would staple them all shut, and then I would sell bags of manure too, and it worked really good. And I did that for a long time also. But the last couple of years, I guess we're getting older, we just kind of said, we're not going to do that. He just puts it out in the field now. So anyways, I hope that answers your question. Do you have another one?
Yes.
Okay.
How many acres of pasture do you recommend per horse for being out during the day or for pasture-fed horses?
Okay. So we don't have enough acreage fenced off to sustain our horses. It's more for enjoyment, and it gives them a little bit of grass. It keeps them out of trouble. They love it. They get to stretch their legs, but definitely we don't have enough acres for that, and that's okay. I think, honestly, I read somewhere you need like 5 acres for one horse. I honestly don't know if I don't have the exact number on that, and I would ask a veterinarian probably on that to get exact numbers. I don't want to tell you wrong. Our horses go out on grass in the summer, and they're smaller pastures, and they go out there, but they're not out there all day long. So we still feed in the AM and the PM. There may be a month, like in July, where we can cut down on their feeding a little bit if we see them start to gain weight. But the summer season here in Wisconsin is so short that it goes so fast that by the time you get done in June introducing them to grass, you got July. By August, the grass is already eaten down. It's just really short, and we don't have a lot of that. I knew of a barn. It's no longer boarding horses, but they had a lot of acres, and the horses were out there all the time on the grass. And I do know that they had some problems with the horses gaining too much weight. They also had some horses that ended up having other health issues. I'll be honest with you, I came from California where my horses didn't have any pasture. It's not super important to me. We have it, but not in abundance where the horses are on it all the time. And I'm okay with that. I grew up without, they were just in pipe stalls, and that's where they lived, and that's what I knew. So when I came here to Wisconsin, when I married David, it was so much land, I couldn't believe it, and it shocked me. And but honestly, they don't need all that because we're feeding them anyways, and that's how we do it. I would probably talk to a veterinarian or equine nutritionist probably and find out how many acres you should have. Some of the issues that you're going to run into when you board horses and you have horses just out on pastures, what are you going to do if you have horses that tend to get overweight? What if they have metabolic issues? You might be dealing with grazing muzzles. We've had to do that a couple times through the years with horses that had to have a grazing muzzle on during the day. To me, it felt like there was a little bit more work to it than what I really cared to want to do, because there were a lot of issues with horses being on grass, which I was kind of surprised about. I had no idea, but it depends on the horses you have at your barn. So I'm okay with our small little pastures. It's fun for the horses. They love it. They can run, but they cannot live on it. They would not. They would wither away. So we feed them in the morning, and then once they're eating outside in their dry lots, then we can open the pastures around 11 o'clock, and they're out there for a few hours, and then we close them back up around 3. And it's plenty, and then they come back in the barn and they eat. So it's not a whole lot, and it works out fine. I feel like it's a more controlled setting for horses and keeping track of their weight. people, boarders, horse owners, love the idea of having their horses out and running in miles and miles of open land. And it sounds really picturesque and like Kentucky and all that. But you run into a lot of other little issues that come along the way. And I like a little bit more controlled situation with the horses, and they're quite happy on what they get. So I guess that's my thought with it. I'm kind of rambling, but I hope I answered that clear. Okay.
Is there a specific reason you don't put the manure on the grazing pastures? Is it bad for the horses?
You know, yeah, I would not put manure out on the pastures at all when you're gonna have the horses out on there. I'm kind of blank right now on what I'm going to describe, but yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you're probably going to have lots of things growing and weeds and all this other stuff that's going to just pop up, which is going to ruin your pastures. But I've heard that it's not the healthiest, and I guess I would ask a vet on that too. I've just always heard it's not a good thing to put fresh manure out there. You're going to attract flies. You're going to, you know, I just wouldn't do that myself. We've never done it, and on our pastures. So I guess that's not a very detailed question. But you're going to attract a lot of flies and other stuff, and you're going to get weeds, and so I would not do that at all. And I wouldn't think it would be the best for the horses either, but I think you're going to have a problem with weeds if you do that. So I hope that answers your question on that one. Okay, good. We were talking about feeding things that are really important in what I would feel are some of the most important things in running a boarding stable. And if I could say one thing, that if you have only so much money and you can, you have the money to do it, I think one of the best things we actually did was we have automatic waters in all our paddocks. And we have a lot of automatic waters. It's expensive because you got to have the water. Here in Wisconsin, we have our water going from our well, and it goes down 7 feet under the ground and all the way to each paddock. But you know what? I don't ever regret spending that money and putting automatic waters out there, because I can't imagine having to fill water troughs every day. And I go to so many barns where they have to, and they have to fill them every few days. They're expensive to heat. A water trough is much more expensive to heat than automatic water. And who wants to do it when it's cold or it's raining? And, you know, it just sucks. It just sucks. So if you have the extra money, if you can, even if you start out putting in, 2 automatic waters, do it. You will never regret it. And just make sure you do it right. If you're in an area that freezes, make sure you have it. Ours goes down 7 feet. Under the frost line, it goes down 7 feet so that we don't have to worry about water freezing. But if you can do that, because I have been to beautiful barns and they don't have any of that, and people are out there watering those tanks, and it's cold. It's 10 degrees, and they're trying to water them. It's just, you have the hose, and you talk about burnout. And so if you can do that, I would say get automatic waters. I think that's just one of my favorite things. So, okay. And if you have any more questions about that, give us a call and or email. Email us. That sounds like a commercial. Is that a commercial? Give us a call.
Probably.
Okay. So, okay, I have a question here. Hi, Sherry. My husband and I manage a 40-stall boarding barn. We have 5 employees and are looking to streamline the chores in the morning. Do you have suggestions as to what order to do chores in the morning to make it more efficient? Gosh, there is absolutely... I don't even know if there's a way I can even answer this without seeing your setup, because it really depends on how you're set up. We have it where David has his job, I have my job, and we very rarely cross each other's jobs because when we do, it kind of messes us up. So he goes out and feeds all the hay outside. I feed all the grain and supplements and meds and all that. And then we get all the horses out all at the same time. I have seen barns where they feed the horses in the stall and then they put the horse out after for the day. To me, it makes more work in the barn because the horse is pooping and they're drinking water and you really can't get the stall clean. And what if they're not done eating their hay? And I've seen them where they put the horses out and then they feed in the middle of the day and then they feed again when the horses come back in. So I can't give you a good answer on that because I'd have to see your setup and see what you're doing, and then I would kind of talk to you and make suggestions. It would depend definitely on, you have a lot of employees, 5 employees. Well, you have 40 stalls, so that's a lot too. But if you're going to streamline them, I can't, without looking at your place, I wouldn't be able to tell you this is what I would see or do differently. I always tell people if they're boarding horses, you really need sometimes to have a fresh pair of eyes looking at your whole layout instead of someone from within, because when you're in the middle of it, you're kind of in this cycle. I always tell people you're kind of like on a hamster wheel and you can't get off because the horses still need to be fed. Everything still has to go 7 days a week. And sometimes it's hard to get off enough just to breathe, just to look at how you're set up. So I always tell people to bring someone in that has run a barn, they know how to do it efficiently, to just look at it and say, okay, what can we do different? Because when you're in the middle of it, sometimes it's hard to see out and say, how can I do this differently? So I would need to look at it. So I can't give you a better answer on that, and I'm sorry. Okay. I'm in my 2nd year owning and running my barn. I'm still growing, especially with riding lessons. I have 10 riders now, and my goal is 20 a week to pay for the mortgage. I would love some help on how to advertise and expand on a very tight budget, as I'm trying not to go further into debt. I have enough work to keep me on the farm, but not enough income to secure month to month. Boy, that's a transition that is sometimes it's really hard to make, is when you have to work another job, especially to make it. So due to some poor choices David and I made when we built our barn, we got ourselves into a kind of a big financial mess, and we got sued from our builder. It was a long story, but anyways, we had to switch builders, and it was a big mess. So the game plan originally was for David to be home full time at the beginning, and then I would graduate into being home. And because I'd worked for the school district and I had the medical insurance and all that. It turned out, because we were so financially messed up, that we both had to work. And he kind of went slowly down, graduated less hours as we started to get ourselves financially better. And then I worked another 5 years, and then finally I was able to quit. And it was a little scary, I'll tell you, because I had good medical insurance, and I had to go from that to all of a sudden buying my insurance and not having any kind of insurance like it was. And that was huge. But I wanted to be home full time. And the financial part of it, we kept wondering, are we going to be able to make it? And, we had some really, when I say lean years, we had some lean years. And, we were always able to keep our barn full, though, and that was a huge blessing. So I think when you're talking about advertising, and a part of that also is your rates. And are your rates high enough? Are your expenses, your costs low enough? Because that's where people get out of balance, is their rates are not high enough and their overhead is too high, and that's why they are losing money. And that's why that's why the question before about how to streamline the chores, because if you have 5 employees, you're paying out a lot of money to employees. can you carry that financially? As far as advertising, I know everybody goes on Facebook. I do all the time, but I think if you're going to run a business, nothing looks more professional than having a nice website. You can get a good website and have it look really nice for not that much money. And I think my website through Wix, to keep it going for a year, is $150. So, I divide that out, and that all goes into, that gets absorbed into the board rate. The initial cost to have my website done, I paid someone to do that, and I was willing to do that because I had tried doing websites for years myself, and the hours I put into it, they never looked as nice, and I just couldn't do it. I just thought, I can't do this. So I guess for me, I know for me personally, when I'm shopping for something or looking for something, if I see a nice website, it's huge for me. It's a selling point. If I see a website where it's hard to click on stuff, or the pictures don't look very good, it kind of takes it down a notch. So I guess to me, a real good website is super important. Also, the important thing is, I tell people this all the time, you cannot think locally anymore. You have to think globally. People are moving all the time. They're moving out from country to country, from state to state. I can't tell you how many people over the years have called me, seen our website, and they're moving, from another state, and their husband took a job up here in Wisconsin, and they're moving the horses up here. People move all the time. Much more so than I think they did years ago. So a really nice website, I think, is a huge selling point, because people can Google and they'll say horse boarding in Northeast Wisconsin, and our stable will come up. Super important. I think probably the most important thing is a really nice website. And then if you want to have a Facebook page and you can link them together, you can do that. But I personally would not have a Facebook page alone. I would have both, because if you're asking people to keep their horse, you want to make them feel like you're talking to them directly. And on Facebook, it's kind of open for everybody. You want to feel like you're making them special. I would do a website. And as far as when you're on a tight budget, don't go into so much debt. I think when people, when I talk to them, if I could say one thing I would do over, I would not have gone into all the debt that David and I went into at the beginning. We would have probably built a little smaller. But when you're young, you think you have forever and you think you have a lot of years. And even though our place will be paid off by the time my husband is of the age to retire, it sure would have been nice to have it paid off sooner, because that is always hanging over you, the stress, and you have a mortgage to pay. So start slow. You can always add on and build up your clientele, build up your reputation, and instead of jumping into it like we did. And it's 7:28. Wow. And it has gone fast. Okay, so okay, I have a couple more questions here. I can't get to anyone. This has gone so fast, but I have one more here I'm going to answer real quick, and then we're going to be done. Great questions tonight. I've owned my own boarding facility for 3 years now. We have finally gotten more horses in. My struggle is reliable barn help. My husband and I both have full-time jobs outside of the business. I struggle with money management because our barn was never maintained by the previous owners. Wow. So when you buy a place, and a lot of times you don't realize all that comes with it, especially if the barn is older or it's not efficient, or drama, whatever that is, it all comes with it if you buy a boarding stable. And I think as far as finding reliable help, it would have to depend on how your place is set up and what you're paying. I know of one particular stable that has a hard time keeping reliable help. And when I've gone there, how else do I say this? The job is too hard. You know, it's so physically hard that they burn out. And I think if you're going to want to keep reliable help, you set up the stable so that your employees, you make it all as easy as you can for them, because you know what, at the end of the day, they are your goal. They are so important. And if you don't have reliable employees, because you won't change things because the job is too hard, they're going to leave, because it gets, you know, you're asking them to work in very cold weather, really hot weather, rainy weather, all kinds of conditions, and then they're dealing with the horses and cleaning, and it's very hard. So put your employees first, pay them, you know, a fair wage for what you're asking them to do, and make it easy for them. And I think if I could say anything, I think that's why barns have turnover in employees, is because the job is too hard and they get burnt out and they get tired. And you're asking them to do way too much that could be set up easier. And that's probably where people lose money, is with the employees. I know what it takes to run our barn. I know how to do it and make it very efficient. And I would not ask my employees to do anything I won't do. And is it physical? Of course, because you're dealing with everything. Everything about horses is heavy and physical, but it's manageable. And I'm not asking them to do it for 8 hours a day, and we can get it done pretty fast. And you know, you can only do so much physically, and when you're doing it 7 days a week, you're going to burn out. So that's why get your barn streamlined, make it easier for your employees, pay them a good wage, and make sure they're valued. I guess that would be the most important thing, and hopefully you'll be able to keep people. And if you need help with that, I'd love to help you with that. I think that's one of the problems a lot of stables have, and it's just because they're set up poorly and they're not set up efficiently. And it is so important. So I think that's it. We're good to go. You guys are awesome. I want to thank you for joining us. Keep moving forward. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Don't hang on it. Move forward, make changes. If something doesn't work, make another change until you get the rhythm and get your barn set up the way you want to. If you need a fresh pair of eyes, I'd love to help you with that. Keep learning, keep growing. We're all in this together. I made lots of mistakes when we started, many mistakes, and I had to keep going forward because I didn't want to lose the farm, and learn from those mistakes. And I want you to realize you're not alone, and we're all learning. I still learn stuff. Every once in a while something catches me off the guard, and I thought, oh, I didn't know that, or whatever. So because none of us know it all. We're all just kind of figuring it out, and every state does it differently. Every area, depending on the weather, they do things differently, from the west coast to the east coast. So we're all learning together, but we still do it because we love the horses and we love what we do. So thank you for joining us, and I wish you a blessed Easter week. God bless you, and I hope the weather is good where you are, and we will talk to you. We'll see you next Monday. If you have any questions or any comments, please let me know, and we'll talk to you next week. And don't forget to check out probarnmanagement.com, and you'll be able to watch these on YouTube, Facebook, or that website anytime after this. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.